So I'm so excited that Youpa Stein has joined us here tonight for the Plastics and Wildlife talk she's giving. She is an artist and a concerned citizen who works to raise awareness about plastic pollution and the human health and the environmental justice harms that are caused by plastic by giving talks and writing and creating art and working for policy solutions for this problem. Her belief in the rights of nature fundamentally shaped her work. She was born in Montana, and she volunteers for the Beyond Plastics Left Speakers Bureau, and she also volunteers as a co-chair for Families for a Livable Climate Plastics Working Group. It's a long one. So Youpa says she agrees with writer, farmer, and activist Wendell Berry in his belief that the care of the earth is our most ancient and worthiest responsibility. So I'd like to have you join me in a warm welcome, a round of applause here, and
Thank you. Okay.
I gotta get my clicker. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I loved hearing about the bird sightings, and I don't know if it counts, but we've had a sandhill crane just down the hill from us. We can hear it chortling. Does it count if you can't see it? Yeah. So, thank you. Sound okay? It's great to be joining you and connecting here tonight. I want to thank Ann Reddy and Gallatin Valley Earth Day and Kyle Moon and sounds kind of strange.
Give me a second.
Sounds like I'm in a can.
Takes
And
a
you,
little getting used to when you're hearing your voice through it.
oh, okay. But I sound okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. So Kyle Moon and Lorene and Sacagawea Audubon Society chapter. And thank you, Gallatin Valley Beyond Plastics and Hope Lutheran Church. And thanks to all of you for being here in person and online. So as I've been doing talks about plastic pollution, I've been thinking about, oh, we need facts in order to create solutions. We need to understand the problems. At the same time, I've been wondering how much disturbing information can a person absorb before needing to turn away from some of it. So tonight, I'm trying a small experiment. Our talk tonight will be about the impact of plastics on wildlife and humans. And because the Sacagawea Audubon chapter is sponsoring this event, I decided to use birds as an example of some of these impacts. And I was wondering what might help give us some balance. This photograph is by a friend who is in Missoula. Her name is Ushi Carpenter. And I love Ushi's photographs of birds. So I asked her if I could share some of her work occasionally throughout the talk tonight and give us a few moments of rest in the beauty of birds. So tonight we'll have a few of what I'll call Ushi moments. And I'll simply show a photograph, I won't say anything, and we can just enjoy it and take a breath. So we're going to practice, and I assure you, you can all do this.
It's nice. Let's try this.
We'll practice some more. Do I need to do it from there? Take breath. Here we go. So I'm just, introduce, my name's a little odd, so I'll say it again, Youpa. And I'm a volunteer co-chair with the Families for Livable Climate Plastics Working Group, which is an affiliate of the National Organization Beyond Plastic. And tonight, I just wanted to let you know that at the end of the talk, we'll have time for some questions and discussion. And I have a handout that I know that those of you who registered, it's available, but if you want the resources handout, just sign up out here on the table and I'll just email it to you. There's the other ways probably to get it as well. I use the words we and our sometimes in this talk, and generally it's in reference to humans. I'm grateful to live on the Flathead Reservation of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. As you see here, the Bozeman area was once part of a common hunting ground for different tribes. I want to just take a moment to acknowledge the Assiniboine, Blackfeet, Chippewa Cree, Crow, Bovant, Kootenai, Little Shell, Northern Cheyenne, Ponderay, Plains Cree, Salish, Sioux, Hidatsa, Mandan, Arikara, and other indigenous nations of this region, past, present, and future. This map visually shows the lands that were stolen from indigenous people during colonization. Families for a Livable Climate acknowledges that indigenous people are on the front lines of climate change and are and will be disproportionately affected by climate impacts. They're also on the front lines of leadership and have been speaking up about protecting Earth for generations. So to honor and support the work, Families for Livable Climate encourages donations to Mountain Time Arts based here in Bozeman. Anyone know about them? Doing great work, they're doing some work. It was usually around Yellowstone coming up. Western Native Voice and Indigenous Environmental Network. So I want to start with the foundation for why we must end plastic pollution and its contribution to climate change. Oh, got a good sound there. This quote from David Wake's book, The Rights of Nature, gets to the heart of the matter. Humans are about one species among millions, as biologically dependent as any other of the ecosystems that produce water, air, food, and a stable climate. Plastic contaminates our water, air, and food, and soil, and decreases climate stability. It's likely that each of us is here tonight because of relationships and experiences in the natural world. I was born in Montana and have lived here most of my life. But when I was 9 months old, I moved with my family to Petersburg, Alaska. My dad got a job at the forest. This is a picture of me and my dad. And our family was always out in nature. It was a regular part of our family life. I remember a time when I was probably about 8 years old, and my sister and I were out with my dad in our boat, and a huge whale swam next to us. It was probably over 40 feet long. And as my dad respectfully inched closer and closer and closer, I remember feeling both fear and awe and a vibrating sense of aliveness in that mix of feelings. And I've been thinking about the beauty of that whale and what it gave to me and what the natural world gives to us and what we give in return. Not always great. But I've been thinking about beauty. This is a man, Chris Jordan. He's an artist, filmmaker, and photographer. And this is from a TEDx talk a couple of years ago in Seattle. And he said beauty as an essential ingredient in the healing and transformation of the planet. And that beauty
will always carry us home to our deepest assets. So what does my story about the whale, these photographs, these thoughts about beauty have to do with our talk tonight? I'm just going to let that question be and say one more thought, one more quote. Rachel Carson, those who contemplate the beauty of the earth will find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. We need reserves of strength. Yes? So one of the ways I get strength is from trees. I love trees, I love bark. I did a series of masks using bark. This is alder bark and blue plastic from a plastic water bottle. And when I was making it, I was thinking about how plastic is now part of Earth's biological systems, part of our bodies. Made this collection, this dress from a collection of plastic that had no place to go after use except a landfill or incinerator or released into the environment. I made an absurd dress reflecting upon our absurd current relationship with plastic. When I was making it, I was thinking about the wonder of plastic, the bright colors and the seduction of the convenience of plastic. The gloss of plastic is interwoven into every aspect of our daily lives, but the harms caused by plastic are not always visible. As I've been learning more about the harms of plastic, more and more stories and headlines like these come to my attention. Baby fish are filling their tiny bellies with shards of plastic. A pregnant whale was found dead with 50 pounds of plastic in her stomach and her calf dead in her womb. Dippers on rivers, British rivers, were found to be feeding plastic-infested insects to their young. So a couple of years ago, I reached a tipping point that led me to seek ways to do my part to change the larger systems that allow and create plastic pollution. A catalyst for action for me was seeing this photograph of an albatross mother feeding plastic to her chick. An estimated 5 tons of plastic are fed to albatross chicks each year at Midway Atoll out in the Pacific Ocean. Out of the 320,000 chicks that hatch each year on the atoll, they found like 90% have plastic in their stomachs. Expected that half of them will die because of it. Not only does the plastic occupy volume in the chicks' stomachs, leading to a greater chance of death by dehydration or malnutrition, but sharp plastics can fatally puncture portions of the digestive tract. But plastics may also contain harmful toxins, which can accumulate in the tissues of the chicks, compromising their survival. So as a human and as a parent, when I see this photograph, it's such a clear example of how wrong our current production and waste systems are. It's estimated that by 2050, 99% of all seabird species will be ingesting plastic. So I'm gonna pause for a moment and talk about hope. We need hope to be able to do the work that needs to be done. This is a quote by writer Ray Bradbury. Action is hope. There is no hope without action. This may seem like a strange image to pair with hope and action. This photograph is of the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland in 1969, shortly before it caught on fire due to extreme pollution. The river was once one of the dirtiest in the United States. It was mostly dead. Now it has 70 species of fish. When this photograph was taken, there was no EPA, no Clean Air Act, no Clean Water Act. There were no federal legal or regulatory mechanisms to protect the environment. In spring 1970, inspired by several influences, including student anti-war activism and people like Rachel Carson in her book Silent Spring. So influenced by these many different factors, Senator Nelson helped create Earth Day to force important health and environmental issues onto the national agenda. 20 million Americans demonstrated in different US cities. And in December 1970, Congress authorized the US EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. So as citizens, we have the capacity to mobilize to correct mistakes. And now we also have a growing awareness about how our environmental and health laws are sometimes unjust or inadequate. As a citizen, your voice matters. Your voice matters and your actions matter. This slide is an example of what young people are doing around the world. And this example in the middle is the first youth-led climate trial in US history, held versus the state of Montana, set to begin June 12th in Helena, Montana. Ricky Hells, up at the top there, from Broadus, Montana, one of the 16 Montana plaintiffs, said the suit is to help us protect our constitutional rights, protect the homes we love and the people we care about. So each of us has something to give, whether it's smaller or larger actions. And I'll share some actions toward the end of the talk, but first I want to make sure we cover some important information about plastics. So everywhere we've looked on the planet, we find plastic. From the tops of high remote mountains like Mount Everest to the deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench, where researchers found that 72% of the amphipods they studied contain plastic fibers and fragments in their guts. Each of us is breathing in and ingesting plastics. One study found the upper end of that amount to be up to a credit card's worth of plastic a week, adding up to 40 pounds in a lifetime. It doesn't even seem real. We found plastic in beer, salt, earthworms, apples, placentas, and deep in human lungs. We found plastic in blood and breast milk. Since the 1950s, we've produced over 9 billion tons of plastic, over half of which has been produced since 2002. You can see on the graph this huge trajectory of global plastic production. It's interesting that the world's population has tripled since the 1950s, but production of plastic has increased over 70-fold in the same period. Plastic pollutes at every stage, from fossil fuel extraction all the way through what happens to it after it is used. And in the process, it disproportionately harms people of color and people in economically depressed areas around the world. It is important to remember the harm caused by plastic at every stage, because often proposed solutions only look at plastic waste. Plastic also contributes to climate change at every stage. The report Plastic and Climate projects the annual emissions from the stages of the plastic life cycle reaching the equivalent of 615 coal plants by 2050. The plastics industry's greenhouse gas emissions are on track to surpass those of coal-fired power in the US by 2030, so just less than 7 years. For more information, Beyond Plastics has published a report, The New Coal, Plastics and Climate Change, which is available on the Beyond Plastics website. So many of our species are in decline for a variety of reasons. Some of you may know of this report that came out in 2019 by Cornell University, National Audubon Society, and others, looking at 60 years of data that found we've lost 2.9 billion birds on the North American continent since 1970. And there are many different threats to birds, and you all, this is something that you probably know more than I do. But some of them are habitat loss, collisions, cats, light pollution, and some of the things we've been talking about, living in our garbage, toxification of everything, and climate change. Audubon science shows that 2/3 of North American bird species are at risk of extinction from climate change. And there's some great tools on the National Audubon Society where you can look by state and different warming trends to see which ones are most at risk. Second, Audubon Society has a lot of great tools on your website. And one of them is this 7 simple actions to help birds. And you'll notice that one of them is reduce plastic use. And I want to expand that to consider advocating for decreasing plastic production. So the plastics industry really came of age during World War II with shortages in things like metal, silk, and rubber. Manufacturers turned to synthetics for the materials to create the supplies across the whole military supply chain. And as the war, as kind of even before the war was ending, they started looking for peacetime markets. And so we started seeing advertising like this, that more and more plastics American as apple pie, and started seeing plastics more and more in our everyday lives. And some of the technologies of plastic have been life-saving, and some of them are unnecessary and are polluting our planet. So always looking for new markets, the industry started to promote a throwaway living and how disposable items cut down on household chores. So this is an ad from Life magazine in 1955. And from the Society of Plastics Industry Conference in 56, the future of plastics is in the trash can. So some of the early roots. But we started to notice that this throwaway living had some consequences, and campaigns to protect production and profits started coming out with campaigns like Keep America Beautiful. How many of you remember this campaign? So the tagline, people start pollution, people can stop it. So of course, we want to keep America beautiful. And of course, we don't want people littering. But this marketing and some of the greenwashing that's going on today is really about producers deflecting responsibility. It's you, not me, not us, and externalizing the costs. So Coca-Cola used to bring your bottle back, they had to rinse it out, refill it. Now it's not their problem anymore. It's so, and protecting profits, and we're still seeing this today. So we'll dig into plastics a bit more. About 99% of plastics are made by combining chemicals and fossil fuels. On a side note, most human-made chemicals are derived from fossil fuel byproducts produced by the petrochemical industry. It's all very connected. Most of the plastic currently manufactured in the US today comes from ethane, a cheap byproduct of hydraulic fracturing. Hydraulic fracturing or fracking is a process of pumping millions of gallons of water mixed with chemicals and sand deep underground to fracture the bedrock so the pockets of gas can be extracted. Ethane is a component of the natural gas that is extracted from fracking. The ethane is piped to an ethane cracker plant at a facility like this one that just went online in Monica, Pennsylvania. The ethane is heated at high temperatures, requiring massive amounts of energy. And it's called cracking because heat energy is used to break apart or crack molecules to form new molecules to create ethylene, which is a main ingredient or feedstock in single-use plastic packaging. In 2020, facilities with ethane gas crackers, hard to say fast, they emitted greenhouse gases the equivalent of 35 average-sized coal-fired power plants. So these are not climate-friendly operations. This particular facility is already being sued because they blew through their emission limits for a year within the first 3 months. That's as fancy as I get. So there are several factors that contribute to making different kinds of plastic, starting with the base chemical. In this example, we're using ethylene. And ethylene-based plastics account for 62% of all plastics consumed globally. So the ethylene from the cracking facility is still a gas and needs pressure and a catalyst to turn it into polyethylene, a common form of plastic. So the process happens when a chemical reaction causes small molecules called monomers to bind together to form a chain-like molecule called a polymer. So ethylene polymerizes to form polyethylene. So this is just that one example coming from ethylene. So this process, there's some intended chemicals and some non-intentionally added substances. This is a busy slide, but I'll just take a few pieces out of this. So I'm borrowing from Pete Myers. He testified in a US Senate hearing in December. Find his description helpful. So the plastics vary because of the choice of monomer, that basic building block, and the choice of additives. There are thousands of ingredients that can be added to give plastics its desired characteristics and qualities, because there's so many different kinds of plastic. So that might be extra strength or flexibility or protect it from catching on fire. It's fossil fuels, so they burn. They're not. And then there's non-intentionally added substances, which are there because of a couple different things. There's impurities in the ingredients that are intentionally added. That's one source. Because of reactions between chemicals that they can't control, and because of air pollution in the facilities. So each of these three choices can introduce toxicities into the plastics. Plastic is not inert. Biologically, it can be very active, and worn plastic can leach chemicals more easily. So as plastic degrades, it, through being run over, through waves, through sun, through moving through bodies, it breaks down. And so that plastic becomes torn and ripped and smaller. And so the chemicals can leach out more easily in worn plastic. Does that answer your question? Okay. So a team of researchers in Zurich identified 10,500 chemicals in the plastics they studied. Some of these numbers, like my head wants to explode. 80% of the chemicals in plastics have never been tested for toxicity. How is that possible? Chemicals readily migrate out of plastic at every stage of its life cycle, so not just at the end. This graph is interesting. You can see the trajectory of the global plastic industry sales, how it mirrors global plastics production. So out of all this process, the resins that are created are then melted, cooled down, and made into pre-production pellets known as nurdles. It's estimated that 250,000 tons of nurdles leach into waterways each year. You can see this little fish thought the nurdles were food, and that happens regularly. So I'm just going to pull out a couple pieces here. So as plastics break down, I just wanted to point out microplastics can be the size of a grain of sand. Nanoplastics can be the fraction of a size of a blood cell. So health consequences can be from the object or particle damage, and the whale was an example, but it can also happen, those little amphipods down in the Mariana Trench, and they can be from chemical exposures. And there's the variety of chemical exposures. So National Wildlife Federation sums up some of the impacts on wildlife. Hundreds of wildlife species, including countless individual animals, are entangled, strangled, starved, or poisoned by plastic trash and fishing gear worldwide. So plastic, whether it starts out tiny, such as a microfiber released from clothing, or whether it starts out larger, degrades eventually down into smaller and smaller pieces or particles, but it never biodegrades and becomes a beneficial part of life cycles. So in the handout, the follow-up handout, and again, feel free to reach out to me if you want it. These are some of the resources looking at harms of plastic for human health, and I just wanted to give you a little heads up about some of them. If you don't have a lot of time, these are webinars from Beyond Plastics. They're about an hour each. Dr. Phil Landrigan, a pediatrician and epidemiologist, and Jenny Davis, medical doctor, both excellent talks. So if you're wanting to learn more about the human impacts, recommend those. This book is useful, but I don't recommend reading it before bed. An important project that was just published this March, it's the Commission on Plastics in Human Health. So that's longer, it's like 130 and then another 100 pages of references. But it's a compendium of what's known to date about human health and enumerates plastic harms across the life cycle. Bozeman Connection, Megan Wolf, who was here in this space last summer, her parents live here in Bozeman. I think Tomas goes hiking with her dad. She was one of the authors of this project. We're all connected. So we know that chemicals in plastic can be persistent, some of them carcinogenic, neurotoxic, and endocrine disrupting. There's a lot we don't know about the chemicals that are part of plastics, but some things we do know. This is going to look just at some endocrine disrupting or EDC chemicals and some of their impacts. Low doses matter. That EDCs can affect necessary systems all over the body, can impact hormones that regulate our appetite and metabolism. They can disrupt brain development. They can cause cancers, especially breast, prostate, and testicular cancers, all of which are on the uptick. And this is from the human health report, EDCs such as BPA, PCBs, and phthalates can disrupt sexual and reproductive development and function. So there's a lot of research being done. This exquisite timing in development in utero babies and children as they grow are much more susceptible to this intricately timed process in development. So deep concerns. So in Montana, we often see some litter when we're out, but sometimes plastic pollution, especially in the different stages and the extent of pollution that we see in some parts of the world, we don't necessarily see that here in Montana. But there are some things that we can't see, and these are a couple studies that look at some of those. There's in 2019, Environment Montana tested water samples from 50 fishing access sites across the state and found that 66% of those samples contained tiny bits of plastic. A study by Adventure Scientists, I just walked by their building today, downtown Bozeman. They did a 2-year study at 72 locations on the Gallatin River, and they found 57% of the samples contain microplastic pollution. So these are things we can't necessarily see. Every year, 1,000 tons of microplastics are deposited onto protected lands in the Western United States. This is some research out of Utah. So how does this happen? How does this move around? Some of these images show how it's moving through water, air, and soil systems. The tiny bits of plastic can be so small that they can get caught up in the wind and the hydrologic cycle, meaning that they're evaporated with water molecules. Then we have snow and rain and wind moving these tiny pieces of plastic throughout the world. So plastic production and waste is growing at an accelerated pace. The plastics utilizes the inexpensive ethane from the fracking boom, and there are some communities in Appalachia area, Pennsylvania, Ohio, that are really feeling some of the impacts. They utilize this inexpensive ethane to provide a new revenue source. So as we move away from reliance on fossil fuels for energy production and transportation, plastic production is the plan B for the fossil fuel industry. Since 1950, 6.3 billion tons of plastic produced has become plastic waste. Without intervention, plastic waste is projected to nearly triple by 2060. 40% of current production is for packaging, designed to be used briefly one time and then discarded. Aww. And we're lucky to have with us tonight Dave from We Recycle Montana. Wave your hand. And Alexis Alloway from Republic Services. Alexis, there you are. So I'll share some things, but when we have time for discussion, they'll have lots of, they're available and a great resource you have here in town. So generally about a 9 to 10, and I may get corrected as we go into discussion, but generally around 9 to 10% is projected kind of globally to have been recycled. The 5 to 6% recycling rate for 2021 in the US. So many plastics aren't designed to be recycled, like laminates, like potato chip bags, and a lot of plastic, sometimes multiple kinds of plastic are mixed together. It's a challenge to collect uncontaminated plastic. And the few plastics that can be recycled are mostly downcycled, which can happen maybe 1 or 2 times at the most because of the way the plastic degrades. So instead of turned into a similar product, like a pop bottle gets turned into a pop bottle, the plastic degrades in a way that it can't be turned into that similar product. So most of that goes into a lower quality plastic. And we can talk, that's a good question, and maybe we can go into that at the end of the talk. So many plastics have little recycling value and some no market value because it's cheaper to use virgin plastic for production. And there are some emerging concerns over recycling and toxins in plastics. So recycling is not the solution, but it can play a role. In the Gallatin Valley, this is fresh off the press from Alexis, and she gets her information from Dave. So what you can recycle here are clear #1 PET, like this bottle, and translucent #2 HDPE, like a milk jug. No other kinds. No, and I just got corrected because Dave, you told me this is actually PETE. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. This one should be. Oh, you can. Thank you. Good to know. So. Okay.
Recycling bins here in town specifically says, suggests putting the caps on the bottles. Do you think that should be done?
So I think it's not a deal breaker, but the caps don't get recycled is what Alexis told me. So to improve the recycling, might as well ditch the caps if you can. So
Flattening your plastics and putting the caps back on, so it's taking less volume to go and transport forest mail. It's easily separated out at the other end when it gets round as far as caps go, but if you're just putting it back on a full bottle, unclasped bottle, it isn't complicated.
So don't put it on uncollapsed bottles, then it makes things harder. So, so the first part, do we have a microphone? Well, we'll come back. So the consensus for the moment is if you have a hole, you haven't squished it, keep the cap off. If you squished it, doesn't really matter. It's okay. So that's what we know for now. Okay. So Beyond Plastics is advocating for legislation for effective producer responsibility, or EPR requirements. And some of these requirements can improve mechanical recycling. So I'm going to talk about them just for a little bit. Looking at environmental standards for packaging. We have it for cars and appliances. Why not packaging? Advocating for 50% reduction in packaging over 10 years, achieved either through elimination or by switching to reuse and refill. Remaining packaging should be designed to be recycled. Remember, some plastics are not designed to be recycled, many of them, and or made from recycled content. So moving forward, whenever you have opportunity, thinking about some of these considerations. You need to reduce the toxins in plastics. Packaging that contains toxic chemicals is harmful to human health, to wildlife, to our environment, and can make it unsafe to use recycled materials into future products. So they need to be made, the plastics need to be made from the safest materials. About 12% of plastic that produced has been incinerated. It's not climate friendly, it's toxic, and out of the 72 incinerators operating in the US today, 80% are in environmental justice communities. This is a false solution. The Covanta incinerator in Chester, Pennsylvania is the largest of its kind in the US. It burns about 200 tons of recycling material every day. Zuline Mayfield, in an interview, she's a lifelong Chester resident. She said they truck the trash in, so there are about 400 to 500 trucks that go in and out of that facility a day. So imagine living next to those trucks. She said the impact of the incinerator on our community is that 38% of our children have asthma now. We have high infant mortality rates, high cancer rates, and you can't open your window because the smells just permeate throughout your household. Doesn't seem like a good idea. Okay. So I recommend, because this topic is there's a lot to it. The NRDC, their materials, and also Gaia, Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, but this is also on the resource. So as public concern grows about mountains of plastic trash, the plastics industry is promoting technologies that it calls chemical recycling, also known as advanced recycling, molecular recycling, and chemical conversion, and touts this as a solution to the plastic crisis, but it's a false solution. Chemical recycling of plastic is just greenwashing incineration. Most of the materials get burned either directly as fuel or the waste materials get burned. So some of the studies that they've looked at, they're not recycling any plastic, releasing hazardous air pollutants and hazardous waste, again cited in environmental justice communities, mostly burned. Just one site had 500,000 pounds of hazardous waste in 2019. So there's a lot of money being put into this as the solution, so something to be aware of. So solutions are going to require governments to regulate, businesses to innovate, and individuals to act. And I want to clarify the individuals to act part. Each of us can do what we can with what's accessible to us, but we don't currently have many options for buying plastic-free products or what to do with the plastics after they are used. So this issue is too big to be solved at the individual level. We need to look at a systemic level. But as individuals, we can, and working together, support actions and advocate for policies from local to global level that stop the overproduction of single-use plastics, stop the greenwashing and false solutions. We can't just recycle our way out of this problem, and incineration and technologies like chemical recycling are not the answer. We can pressure businesses to design for models for refill and reuse. We can support effective extended producer responsibility and solutions that are accessible to everyone. And we need to stop the harm and injustice at every stage of plastic production. So if we look at global level, national level, and I'll just do really quick here, local level. Bring your attention if there is a global treaty mandate that is in process that's supposed to culminate by the end of 2024. So they have 5 sessions, they've done 1, and there are several organizations that are working at that global level. So if you're interested in that global work, these are good organizations to look at. So on the national level, we've talked about Beyond Plastics, the national organization. They have tons of resources and training. You can sign up for monthly newsletters, webinars, events, and action alerts. They're building a network of grassroots organizations. As Tomas said, there's Gallatin Valley here, and based in Missoula with Families for a Livable Climate. So we have 2 in Montana, and they have free trainings offered quarterly. So one example of an action you can take is to support the National Act, Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. You can contact all 3 of your congressional members in one fell swoop. So that's just one of many. There's current petition to ban vinyl chloride from the East Palestine train wreck that some of you may have heard about. You're so fuzzy. So on the local level, how are we doing for time? Okay, we'll be fast. In 2021, there was the legislature passed a preemptive ban on auxiliary containers. That means that no local governments can pass any regulations for single-use plastics. So Mike Lilly, advisory board member for Cottonwood Environmental Law Center, kind of summed it up. This bill is one example of the legislature methodically stripping local governments of the power to address the harms posed to our environment, while at the same time failing to address those same harms. So we have a constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment, and we also have a duty. The state and each person shall maintain and improve a clean and healthful environment. So the legislature is failing in their duty. And I want Isaac to raise his hand. Isaac Cheek from Cottonwood Environmental Law. They're exploring the possibility of litigation. So if you can help out in any way in that process, that's one avenue. And Isaac's available for afterwards too. So actions that we can do: communicate what's at stake, work together to amplify local government and statewide actions, prioritize them. How can we get larger systemic approaches? What's going to give us the most bang for our buck? Working together to build a broad, nonpartisan coalition of Montana citizens. So this is going to be really important building toward the next legislative session. Would love to have the Audubon chapter and any other organizations that are represented here to let's start having conversations about how we can work together. So if I took a survey and made a list about what each of us values about living in Montana, we'd probably have some things in common. It might include being able to enjoy the beauty of Montana. It might include a healthy quality of life for our fellow citizens, our wildlife, our friends, our family now and in the future. So you can sign up for, there's a sign up sheet out here for Families for Livable Climate Plastics Working Group. You can email me. I encourage you to have manage a Facebook page working toward plastic free in Montana. And look at all these, and this is even not everybody, but so many Bozeman resources. Sacagawea Audubon chapter, Gallatin Valley Earth Day, Gallatin Valley Beyond Plastics, Cottonwood Environmental Law, and Mountain Time Arts. We have responsibilities in our kinship with the web of life that makes our lives and all lives possible. Our health depends on a healthy, just, diverse, and vibrant Earth. So now we have time for questions. Thank you so much. Oh, I have to show, I love this one too. Has anybody seen this bird? I haven't, I don't know that I have. I don't even know how to say it. Swainson's hawk? Ah.
They make a long journey down to South America,
Ah.
even down into Argentina. So one of the longest migrations that we have in Yeah. All right. Sorry, I'm turning into like that mode right here. I work in Yellowstone with the Tetons, and we find these occasionally. They do a long migration down into South America, so all the way down into Argentina, Chile. So they make a long journey. But we're gonna open it up to some questions, both here presently and then people online. So those that are in online, if you guys would put your questions in the question box, we'll answer those too. So does anybody have any questions? I know there's some. All right, I'll just give you guys a mic and then we'll kind of do it by that way.
There are a number of fine documentary films about pollution and trash and whatever. One that I've seen a few years ago was called Trashed, starring Jeremy Irons. It was fabulous. But perhaps you know of some others, and on some of the handouts, do you have suggested for documentaries to look at?
I don't have it on my list, but I can easily share that. And one documentary done by the Story of Stuff is called The Story of Plastics. And it's been used quite a bit as a showing and then discussion afterwards. And so there's opportunities, I think, even through Beyond Plastics to offer it without charge and some discussion guidelines. But that's a good opportunity to bring various groups together and start building a broader conversation and action plan. So there is a list, and if you sign up, I can share that.
And yeah, so, and yeah, on the people who are online, there are two handouts in there. So if you guys look to your side panel, it takes you to resources for Beyond Plastics and so on. Just FYI. So I want to just say, going back, more of a comment, but that artwork that you did with the tree bark and the plastics, that was pretty cool. That's a piece right there.
Bark is amazing.
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment that, but yeah, keep the questions coming. I'll come get you next, Alexis.
Yeah, I look at all this water bottles that are going around, and I go into Costco and I see a wall of water bottles. But my question is, I wonder, how toxic is the liquid inside? Is the water in some way affected? Should I be worried or should I just not?
So really good question. One of the people that I recommended in a webinar was Jenny Davis, and she does a really good job explaining that. But any plastic that is heated has much more chemical leaching. So it's really important not to heat things in plastic or keep water bottles in a hot car. So that is really important. Yeah. Thank you. And there's probably some, I mean, there's toxins in our water. So even before the water got in the bottle, I'm laughing, it's not funny.
Don't freeze and rethaw.
So any kind of degrading, such as freezing, also these, the carbon bonds from that original monomer are pretty strong, but the chemical bonds are not. So those, you think about these particles moving through stomachs, through water, through tires, through, and some of there's a research showing up that these micro and nanoplastics can actually, especially as they degrade, attract other chemicals. So pesticides that are in the ocean or in our waterways can glom on and have a ride.
Youpa, first, I want to say thanks for a fantastic talk and sharing a lot of great information. For people in the audience who are looking for tangible things that you can do to help protect wildlife here in the Gallatin Valley from plastics pollution, I want to share a couple ideas. Number one, I work for Public Services, a garbage hauler, and people don't think about the importance of bagging your garbage. right? Because when trucks are tipping garbage, if it's loose in the can in windy Montana, that garbage is going to blow all over the place. And Logan tries really hard to manage litter. They do a great job, but it's not perfect. And in talking to them at the landfill, emphasizing bagging your garbage, and if you're self-hauling to the landfill, the importance of securing your loads, because we do have a lot of litter on the highways that's coming from unsecured loads. And then finally, there is a ton of plastic litter in the ecosystem right now as the snow is melting out, and there are great opportunities to get involved. So the city of Bozeman has wonderful resources to support community cleanups from April 22nd through 30th. They'll be tabling at the Earth Day celebration, so stop by or check it out online. And then I know at Republic Services, we donate service and help the Gallatin Watershed Council with community cleanups. They have a dog poop cleanup coming up on Friday, April 21st. And then they're doing a community litter cleanup on Saturday, May 20th. That'll be at Story Mill. So Gallatin Watershed Council is another great way to get involved.
Thank you, Alexis.
Do you have a suggestion for non-plastic?
Do you have a suggestion for non-plastic containers for putting our trash in?
I've been asked that before. I mean, you can buy compostable garbage can liners, and you can also maybe look at reusing existing, like I just use a rabbit food bag from a 50-pound feed bag that I used as a garbage bag instead. So those are the two things that come to mind, is reuse and possibly compostable liners. And I don't have anything better to offer than that.
So do you know when Walmart is collecting those garbage bags, you know, what are they doing with them?
This guy knows more than I do. So.
Most of the film plastic is consumed to waste to energy facilities. A very small percentage of it goes to Nevada, where it's made into the Trex decking. And the Trex decking then in turn leaches out of it. So it's not something that we support with Four Corners Recycling.
And just to echo something that Alexis said, that the recycling that you're doing here is going to domestic markets and it's turning into products. Is that true?
Well, 80% of what is dropped off in the Gallatin County drop-off bins is number 1 and 2 plastics. And 20% of it is 3 through 7s that ends up getting shipped to Utah. Most of the time, we've just started shipping to Lethbridge, Canada. And that other 20% of the plastics that are dropped off there do end up in waste to energy. And so by the wishful recycling, dropping off items that are not 1 and 2, you're not helping the cause at all.
No, that's really important. So, so as much as you want this number 5 thing or this yogurt tub to be recycled, it's actually going to be burned and worse than going in the landfill. So that's important. Thank you.
Somebody online just wants to know what the photographer is on this. So let's put that out and to spell it. I think you pronounce it as Ushi.
Ushi. Her name is Ushi Carpenter. And go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to spell it out. It's USCHI photography.com.
And she does post great Facebook posts and often, and she's available for talks. If anybody's interested, let me know. But her Facebook posts are great because she often writes poetry and talks about the experience of photographing birds too.
You mentioned the story of plastics, and we, Gallatin Valley Earth Day hosted a screening of that. It was actually directed by a filmmaker with roots in Bozeman, Dea Schlossberg. But in our conversation with Dea, a lot of what I was picking up was the single-use sachet packs, things like ketchup packs, laundry detergent packs, anything in a single-use, rip open and pull the moist towelette out. All of these things have mixed-use plastic in them and are essentially unrecyclable. And them following the waste stream, it basically all ends up overseas, and entire communities live on top of it. It's just an endless supply. What are some of the sort of solutions to the single-use sachet sort of surplus that we've seen? Everything comes in it, from bug spray wipes to just, I don't know, you could find a endless list. And what can we do as consumers to encourage those producers from producing them in the first place? Boycotts are fine. You know, like if all 70 of us in here never buy another sachet, guess what? The market won't notice. It's 70 people. Like, what can we do? How can our voice be heard to push companies away from producing those things?
So organizations like Beyond Plastics often have sort of campaigns that sort of galvanize people from around the country. And that would be a good one. Really, it feels immoral, companies marketing to third world countries these sachet, like deliberately marketing, and that's even worse than what's happening here. So good question, but I think that connecting with each other. So the power of Audubon in this country is amazing. There are a lot of you in the citizen science that many of you partake in is a huge, you know, it's like you have a huge number of people working with groups like Beyond Plastics, kind of finding the way to connect the power of all these people is one one pathway, and then working toward legislation when we can. We have this local thing now but there are, you know, the next level of creating awareness so people know it's a problem. Not everybody knows it's a problem. And what can each of us do to amplify that message? And legislation, I think it has to come down to you know, it's like there's very little incentive. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question.
So in the sake of time here, we got a question here and then a couple online. So, and then I think we'll end up wrapping it up there.
I just wanted to ask two things. One is about something that I know is it's single use, basically, cling film. It's in everybody's house, and we only use a given piece one time and it's gone. And it is absolutely impossible to recycle. We need to find good alternatives. Maybe things like a cotton handkerchief and a piece of string.
I know some people use the beeswax wraps.
Yeah.
I have purchased glass that has some plastic in it for the top, but I can reuse it many times. So kind of thinking, do we really need it? So if we can think of examples where it serves a function that you really care about, starting to brainstorm, you know, it's like, well, what else might, as humans, we're pretty darn clever when we put our minds to it, you know? So what would serve that purpose? I think those kinds of questions are really important, like the everyday things that we're used to, and they function well. Plastic is pretty darn amazing.
Yeah.
In addition to being horrid.
Yeah, and at the other end of the scale, woven plastic tarpaulins like you use in your garden, especially the cheap ones, if they get very much sun exposure and then you set them away someplace for a while, when you open it back up, it'll just explode with blue powder.
Yeah.
And that's not good for your lungs. It's probably not good for your soil either.
It's not. The soil health, I had to take out a slide, but soil health is, that book that I said wasn't good, nighttime reading, talks a lot about soil and microplastics. Yeah. So I think oh, go ahead.
A couple more, yeah. So Kristen is talking about how we have to include changing our culture to help stop plastic use, and how currently it's very hard to transport food without plastic. The way we grow, make, eat, and share food should be a focus as well. So what are some strategies that people are currently doing or that we should be aiming for in the future with food at all those different levels of production, transport, dissemination for plastic reduction?
So first off, I'd say local. How much, what can we do locally and creating systems locally so we're not transporting as far? There was a time when we didn't use plastic when we transported food. So there are some ways to do it that we've already done. Anybody else have some other things to add to that?
Boxes, paper bags.
Terry? So we had boxes and paper bags.
So I have a list of one of the posters that I created that is exactly that. It gives lots of alternatives, and some of the stores are doing that. Like Costco, you don't get a plastic bag, you get a box. Town and Country does a lot of that. Beeswax wraps, there's a whole list. And we can help, even though there are 70 of us here, we could talk to 10 other people and help educate, because I think education is where we need to be right now, because so many people aren't aware of the information you provided for us. And I know, although it's detailed and it's depressing, it's important to help spread the word and give people our alternatives. And Beyond Plastics is meeting with the city of Bozeman in the end of May. And so it's really helpful to get your opinions, your suggestions, because the city of Bozeman, as Isaac knows, put out a resolution that they are in favor of helping the environment by getting rid of plastic and support, or would support, a ban on plastic use, especially single use. So I am then, or Beyond Plastic is going now to the city of Bozeman saying, that's great that you wrote this resolution. Let's put some action into that. And so we're going to give them suggestions that they can do. Now, obviously, money's a big deal, but there are a lot of things that we can be doing individually and helping to educate that can take steps to change our culture of throwaway. And there are so many healthier ways and actually simpler ways. We just need to get into the habits. Single-use plastic bags, we can use reusable bags, and everyone says, oh, I've got 100 of them, I don't need any more. But are you using those 100, or are you sharing them with other people? So there's a lot of things.
And sometimes simple, some communities are working with businesses, putting up signs in the parking lot. Did you bring your plastic bag into the store? And to go back to that one question, designing for refill and reuse. So transporting food that can't be grown locally, but packaging designed so it can be reused multiple times, and bringing systems in that can use that reuse design. So we're cutting down on the production of plastics.
Speaking of Town and Country, I think what they do that's pretty cool is if you bring your own bag, they have different nonprofits and organizations. They donate like 10 cents for every bag that you have. So I think that's a good incentivization to have local grocery stores and things like that kind of have them bring their own bags. I think we have one more question online and then that's it. And then in the end, we just want to make sure Anne's got one more announcement and to make sure to sign up for Youpa's email list here if you guys want any more information regarding Beyond Plastics.
And also sign up for the local Gallatin Valley Beyond Plastics.
And the
Connected.
local chapter.
I have an incentive for anyone who signs up. I have straws that were made out of kelp. So they're not plastic and you get a straw to sign up.
Free kelp straws. That's awesome. So one more question.
Okay, yeah, I'll just sneak one more question in here. So one of the big problems that I've keep hearing about is that you can pass a law, but then if a company has enough money, they just plan to break the law and then include the fine in their budget. So how do we go about actually shutting things down and not just doing a fine that they might be able to afford?
So working together, what I found like with an organization like Beyond Plastics at the national level, they've got a reach into every state and looking, sort of utilizing the information and knowledge that is out there because, the invested interests are investing a lot of money in continuing the profits. So what we have on our side is connecting with each other and the knowledge we have.
Thank you, Youpa.
Thank you.
Really, really good stuff. Just two comments before I say goodbye and everyone says goodbye. I wanted to have a follow-up to the gentleman who was asking what can we do. We actually have, Gallatin Valley Earth Day has a YouTube channel. If you go to our website at gallatinvalleyearthday.org, you can click and get to our YouTube channel where we have tons of talks. And a few years ago, we had a fantastic talk done by Julie Fahy, who lives here in town. It's called the Zero Waste Home. And she has tons of ideas on what you can do, how you can have a zero waste home and not use plastics. And she has just amazing photography too. It's just a really excellent talk. So I just recommend that if you're looking for ideas. And then the other thing is I wanted to invite you to come back here again on Thursday or online. You can register on our website for it. A few years ago here at Sacagawea Audubon, I was blown away, frankly, by a talk here by George Werthner about the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And honestly, it was one of those light bulb moments for me. I never realized what a special place we live in and how unique and special it is in the world. And so that's why I invited him back to speak for Earth Day, and he'll be here. I recommend you'll love his talk. It's about it's called Our Backyard, How We Can Support Wildlife and the Ecological Integrity of the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem. But anyway, don't miss it. George Werthner, 7 p.m. right here again on Thursday. Thank you. Do you want to finish, Kyle?
I think at this point, we can all turn it to Youpa and just give her a big old round of applause. Amazing talk. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.